I'm Willie D. Nelson from All Things Good and Nerdy, a pop culture podcast, part of the Gonna Geek Network. Just like the show you're checking out now. Shows on the network are individually owned, and opinions expressed may not reflect others. Find other tantalizingly geeky shows at GonnaGeekNetwork.com.
And welcome to Play Comics, where once again we're looking at a video game based on comic properties and how well it represents that source material. And despite the fact that this episode is really cursed for reasons that we'll probably get into, we're here looking at Robotech Invasion. And I say we because it's not just me. You guys have had those episodes before. They're really bad. We have Greg Sewart here from the Player One podcast. Greg, how are you today?
Good. Thanks for having me.
I kind of was strong-armed into it. I say that like I wouldn't have wanted to get you on the show anyway, but mutual friend Chris Baker did say something to the effect of, "Hey, Chris, if you don't ask Greg to come on for Robotech, I will never come back."
Yeah, I can always count on C-Bake. Ex-roommate, ex-coworker Chris Baker.
So what was it that made him instantly think of you for a Robotech episode?
Well, because I actually was one of the developers on this game. I was the level designer. It was the first game I ever worked on in game development. And just huge Robotech fan in general. And like I said, C-Bake and I were roommates at one point, so I'm sure that he knew that from the various Robotech toys scattered around. So just I got really lucky because I ended up getting to jump into video game development on a property that I absolutely adored since I was a kid. So I think that's why I'm here. I think that's why he thinks I should be here.
He's been right on every other guess he's thrown my way, though. So it works out.
There you go. Well, I hope to continue the trend.
What was it that got you into Robotech in the first place?
Honestly, I was thinking about that today, actually. And it really has a lot to do with the fact that I think a lot of kids my age who were 80s kids, big transforming robots. That was really the main reason that I got interested in it to begin with, because I was very much of the generation where it's like Transformers, GoBots, and anything else in between that, anything that could transform. I wasn't really a big G.I. Joe kid or anything like that. Masters of the Universe, and that was all. So I think that's what I was originally drawn to when I first discovered the show back in, I'm guessing, was 85 or 86. But I got past that, got past that surface pretty quickly because it's just, especially the Macross, especially the first season, which is Macross, is so compelling. It's such a great story. And it was sort of, there wasn't a lot of anime on television back then. I mean, we had a few different things like Voltron and Astro Boy and stuff like that, but Robotech in general dealt with much more mature subject matter than we were used to in shows, like I said, like GoBots or He-Man or Transformers. And I think that's what really drew me in, because I would have been 9 or 10 when I saw Robotech for the first time. And, it was a space soap opera with big transforming robots. So, I mean, what wasn't to love about it?
The big giant robots seems to be a pretty common thing that people love. Like, I mean, you're right. How do you go wrong with big giant robots? I'm trying to think of a bad thing with big giant robots, and it's only bad because other things are better. Like, big giant robots are just really cool.
Yeah. And I mean, the sheer scale of it too, right? Again, I know I keep going back to Macross here, but I mean, one of the transforming robots had like aircraft carriers for arms. I mean, that's, scale wise, that's pretty big. So it was impressive.
It's little things. Well, I can't say little things about aircraft carriers, but it's things like that that go in there. And I mean, yes, you can have robots that look like cars and trucks and stuff, and everything is going to have their thing that looks like that. But just getting those little touches in there, I think, were perfect for this. And I mean, we've gone over before on previous episode of the show, looking at Robotech stuff, like the conglomeration of the three shows and how it all works timeline wise and everything, and what is canon and what isn't. And which the short answer is, if you like it, it's canon, and if you don't, it's not, because
Pretty
there's
much.
so much stuff out there. But just Robotech at its core is, hi, we're good guys, there's bad guys, we're gonna go beat them, there's big giant robots, yay.
Yeah, for sure. But again, like the interplay between the characters, and it's funny because when you really look at it, even though it's made up of three totally disparate series, they all deal with exactly the same thing. They all deal with people from different alien races, I guess would be the best way to put it, falling in love with each other or being affected by each other's culture. Which again, it's like when you're little, it's great to just see the big robots fighting and all the explosions and everything like that. But when you're really paying attention to it, there's so much more going on in those stories in all three series, that it just resonated. I mean, and I remember too, Robotech, because it was syndicated, was on every weekday as opposed to Saturday mornings, at least where I grew up. So it was on, I think, at like 4 p.m. on weekdays. So I would walk home from school, I would watch Robotech, and then I would go deliver newspapers on my paper route. And it just so happened that the network that was broadcasting it here, I don't know what it was. I don't know if they didn't have the rights to broadcast the entire series, or they just didn't happen to have the entire series. Because, and we're going to be talking about the new generation here, because that's what Invasion is based on. It would get like 4 episodes into New Generation, and then it would restart back at the beginning. Like, and I must have watched that show through probably 4 times, thinking every time, like, this is going to be the time that I get to see that 5th episode of New Generation that they keep teasing and then they never show. But I never did when I was a kid. The only reason I even found out what was happening later in that 3rd series was a mixture of buying the comic books, which were released by a company called Comico, which I don't believe is around anymore. And there was an art book that came out called Robotech Art 1 that had synopses of every episode in all 3 series, along with basically, I'd say, photographs of the actual animation frames, which was incredible. But that's how I learned what happened, how the story actually ended, because, of course, there was no internet back then. So it wasn't until years later that I actually saw all of the episodes of Robotech, when the first DVD releases happened, which was probably in the early 2000s. So, but yeah, I mean, I liked it enough that I just kept rewatching it over and over again.
I can't imagine how much that would suck to know that there's more and you just can't get it. And like, at least everybody in your area is stuck in the same thing, same
Right.
situation as you.
Yeah.
But, eventually you start going a town over and a town over, and somebody got to see the rest of it.
Somebody must have, yeah. But I mean, like I said, like I had sort of was discovering comic books a little bit at that point. I never got heavy into a lot of different comics, but there was a comic shop called Wilkie's Wonderful World that I would go to every week, and they stocked the Robotech comics, and I still have a bunch of them around somewhere. I don't think I ever got a full run of them, but that was how I learned how that story ended. And those not great illustrated comic adaptations of of this show.
The comics have such a weird lifespan anyway. Like,
Yeah.
a series of one issue, and DC of all people, and imprints of Marvel, and it's just it's weird. It's
Yeah.
so weird.
But I was taking in everything I could. I had all the toys that I could find, everything. I mean, this was the series for me, like, into Star Wars, into Transformers, mostly into GoBots because they were cheap enough that I could afford them. But if there was anything I found that was Robotech, I was all over it. Actually ended up buying Jetfire, uh, the Jetfire Transformers toy, because of course that was actually a repaint of the Valkyrie from Macross. But when I bought it, I mean, I was into Transformers, but I bought it because it was Robotech, not because it was Transformers. So yeah, love it.
Did you have any desire to paint it to be the Valkyrie, or did you just leave it Starfire, Jetfire?
I just left it. Yeah, I didn't. I wasn't that creative. I wasn't that talented. I wouldn't do stuff like that with my toys. But it did kind of rankle because it was like the Skull Squadron. It was that mold, but all in red and white. So it was weird, but it was cool. I liked it. And I mean, was it who was it who released Robotech toys here? Was it Matchbox? I think it might have been Matchbox. Anyway,
I know Matchbox had some of them.
yeah, and they never released a transformable Valkyrie. So the one that they had was sort of this big bulbous cartoonish Valkyrie that the action figures would fit in, but it didn't transform. Same thing with the Cyclone Cycle toy that came out that I did have. It did not transform, which kind of sucked because I'd say out of the entire series, the Cyclone was definitely my second favorite mecha, transforming mecha in there, if you don't really count the SDF-1. And never ever had a toy where I think there was one that transformed, but it looked terrible. So I never had a toy that actually transformed, which was always a bummer.
And is that true to this very day?
I do not. You know what? I do have one little figure that I bought a couple years ago that is technically transformable for the Cyclone, but it's so tiny and fragile that I just sort of, and it's not like I play with toys anymore. If I buy that stuff, I put it on display. So it's in robot mode and sitting down in my game room right now, never to be touched again because I almost broke it putting it together to begin with, so I don't want to break it. But I do have a Scott Bernard wearing his Cyclone armor finally after 40 years of waiting.
Well, we're going to think about how sad all of that was until the very end when it got not so sad. Well, I dropped some promos for a few other things.
Hello! And welcome to Escape the Mojoverse, an X-Men comics podcast where I, Matt Parent, drag my spouse Allison,
That's me!
kicking and screaming into the wonderful world of Marvel's Merry Mutants.
It's really not that intense.
Yeah, that's all just kayfabe.
No wrestling lingo in the promo. What we really are is two nerds, one an expert and one a newbie, binging the X-Men, focusing on comedy and craft.
Exactly. We hardly ever use those clockwork orange eye thingies anymore.
Escape the Mojoverse, an X-Men comics podcast. Check us out every Monday and Friday wherever you get your podcasts.
War continues to rage across the globe. Our valiant men and women have been winning battles as the war continues to march on. Hollywood continues to produce clone after clone of the films you used to enjoy. There have been some defectors, but most remakes continue to assault your sensibilities. Our small troop of trained experts continue to expose these imposters while showing Hollywood a better way. Support the invasion of the remake by listening, reviewing, and subscribing. Your knowledge is power. We're all in this together. Spread the word.
Subscribe to Invasion of the Remake on all major podcast providers. New episodes dropping weekly.
At invasionoftheremake.wixsite.com/podcast.
Those are some great things to check out. But first, let's finish up here. So, Greg, what we're looking at here, what's bringing us together, is this October 2004 game, Robotech Invasion. Came out on the PS2 and the Xbox, made by Vicious Cycle Software and Global Star Software. I don't know why I'm telling you that because, like you said, you worked on it.
Yep. Yeah, it was my first game development gig. Stepping back a little bit, so of course Vicious Cycle also released Battle Cry, which was the first Robotech game. And I was working as an editor at Electronic Gaming Monthly at the time, and I had actually flown out and met that team because, again, I was a huge Robotech fan. So I was like the guy to cover that for our magazine, and we actually had the exclusive preview on that game. And then when I left the games media, I happened to be talking to Eric Peterson, who was the president of Vicious Cycle. We were just chat. We stayed in touch after that preview, and said I was kind of considering going into game development. And he's like, "Well, why don't you come work for us? We're working on a new Robotech game. I know you like that stuff. Why don't you come down and take a look at it?" And I did, and the opportunity was there, and I took it. So yeah, and it was an interesting change because Battle Cry was really well known for using the cell shading style that I think went over really well because, you know, cell shading was really big then anyway. It still felt kind of new, and it looked more like the cartoon, which was great. But Invasion, we were going for a semi-realistic style, which even replaying it again a bunch this week, I don't know exactly how I feel about that. I think I might have preferred it to stay cell shaded, but it was interesting to see that world realized in a different visual style than just the straight cell shading. So I still think it looks pretty decent overall, but yeah, I definitely had mixed feelings about it at the time.
I mean, especially considering it came out in 2004. Like, it looks good. You've got to remember when it came out when you look at it, and
Yeah.
that's like my era of everything, so that's fine. It's really easy for me to remember that. But
Right.
it looks good. But how much Robotech material were they giving y'all to look at and work from for this one?
I think we had a fair amount. There was another, I think there was another art book, and we were actually drawing from, there's a Robotech tabletop RPG. There were a bunch of books out for that as well. And I believe that we had a couple of those books, just for the different mecha and things like that. But for the most part, I, I don't think there was a lot more to draw on from outside of what the story was in the show. We just kind of did the same thing that they did with Battlecry, where we did a parallel story. So we made up a bunch of original characters and had that adventure happening parallel to Scott Bernard and his freedom fighters in the actual TV show, to the point that you actually come across Scott and Lancer and a few other, I think those are the main two that you come across in the game. You actually walk up and can see a conversation between Scott and Lancer at one point. And I think you actually helped them out in one of the battles too. So I kind of like that idea. I'm a big fan of doing that sort of thing in licensed video games. Like Westwood did that with Blade Runner as well back in the late 90s, which I thought was brilliant. It was a great way to have a Blade Runner story without just recreating the exact film and the exact plot. So same thing here. Like, I liked that we were definitely in the world and we were sort of crossing paths with the main characters from the actual show, but we were getting to explore different parts of the world that you didn't see in the show. So I think, though, one of the things that I really love is that one of our characters actually ended up in the official Robotech Invasion comic book. So I don't know what came first. I don't know if the title of the comic book came first or the title of our game came first, but there was a comic series, I think it's 5 or 6 issues long, that was being released around the same time. And one of our antagonists, Dr. Osmond, in the game ended up being in the comic book. And I'm 100% positive that that is a character that Vicious Cycle and the game designer, Matt Gregg, came up with. He was not a character that we were given. He was a character we created. So
That
was
is
kind
just
of cool.
really cool.
Yeah. Yeah, we were pretty pumped about that. One of the other things that happened that wasn't necessarily a bummer, but I think as a big Robotech nerd, what I saw, and I think what a lot of us saw on the team where we were making a video game, was the opportunity to mix and match the different like Macross and Southern Cross and Mos Beta, which were the 3 series that Robotech was based on. Of course, when you watch those on television, you don't see much of the different series sort of intermingling. They would do, I think, in the first episode of Southern Cross is a clip show of Max and Miria Sterling from Macross, but that's really all you see in the Southern Cross. And then I don't believe you ever see any kind of clip show in the new generation. So there's no real crossover there. The connection is all dialogue and all story. And what I remember feeling is that wouldn't it be cool if we could actually have, maybe some destroyed mecha from the first 2 wars in this game. And I think, and I can't say this for sure, but Dr. Osmond, who I was just talking about, at one point you fight him in a hover tank. You actually see the hover tank a little bit earlier. And I remember seeing that in the design documents, the story in the design documents, and thinking, oh, that must be a hover tank or a modified hover tank from Southern Cross, which I think at some point it probably was supposed to be that. But there were some pretty strict rules about that sort of thing. No cross-pollination between those 3 series. And I think that, the licensing, especially for Macross, has always been really messy. Harmony Gold has sort of had those fights for a long time. So I think that they were just super careful about stuff like that, which was the same reason why we didn't use any of the music from the show outside of Upio Minucci's version of that theme song. Other than that, it's all an original score by Jesper Kidd, which was great. He was really hot at the time, and I think the score is great. But again, being a big Robotech nerd, I was always kind of waiting for those standard. There were like 5 or 6 different tunes that they used throughout that entire show that you kind of always wanted to hear in the context of the game, but it never really happened. So what are you going to do? But I still think it does it looks good in a lot of ways for sure.
And like you, I think that parallel story thing works really well. You know, we see it here with a bunch of the Robotech games. We see it with a bunch of the Gundam games as well. Like, you have these big sprawling wars going on, you know, so when you get franchises like that where people get super nerdy down in the nitty gritty, this is what happened when and everything, that's a nice way to not have people super picking your thing apart.
Right. Yes, exactly. And again, a really good way not to limit yourself as far as your storytelling and your level design goes. I really dig that a lot.
That was one thing I was kind of struggling with a tiny bit when I was putting my show notes together, just for when I'm making the website post and everything, is who do I say in here is a playable character? Because there's the guy that you created, but who actually is he?
Right.
Since he kind of, it gets assigned a identity, and how does that play with like other games? I think the closest thing that I have to be like that is like some of the Men in Black ones, where you're just a random different agent that they made up for you to be in the game.
Right. Yeah. I mean, that's Locke's whole deal. It is funny. I think going back and replaying this as someone who worked on it, you know, I am proud of the game, but at the same time, I play it with such a critical eye because I know what was planned, and I know you know what I mean? Like when I'm going through, we had some pretty big sprawling levels, and there's a lot of empty space in a lot of those levels because there were things that we just weren't, there were things that were out of scope that we were planning and we just couldn't do. And yeah, boy, the way we named our main character was a little ham-fisted for sure. Where it's just, well, the dead guy whose armor you're taking was named Locke, so now you're Locke. So it's like, okay, cool.
At least it's in there. It's more than some games do.
Yeah, that's fair. And I did like that because there was always the big thing, and I think it still is back then, about the silent protagonist, which I'm not a huge fan of. Like it happens in Zelda games all the time, and it happened in Grand Theft Auto 3, but then they actually, you know, gave the main character some dialogue moving forward in that series too. But we didn't give our characters any dialogue, our main characters any dialogue. We definitely went the silent protagonist route. And as I was playing earlier today, actually, when you meet Guppy at the end of the first level, or actually, no, this is at the beginning of the second level, where she's traveling with you and you come to a stop and she starts talking to you. And of course, the main character doesn't say anything to her. And she's just like, what did I do to deserve the silent treatment? So I was kind of happy with that little joke there about the silent protagonist. But yeah, no, we definitely were looking to create characters that were just vessels for the player, for sure. And I guess, yeah, you're right. We never reveal what the main characters, or the first main character's true name actually is. I don't think we did anyway.
And also, being the kind of story that you're telling here doesn't really matter, you know? I mean, you're doing a parallel story of everything. It's a war that definitely doesn't have any connections to real life at all if you're looking at the circumstances of everything. Nuh-uh, never. And like, I mean, it doesn't matter. You know, I think it makes it easy to see yourself in the story.
Yeah. Yeah, that was the goal anyway. So I hope we succeeded on that.
I mean, I think you did, but I'm just me.
Thanks. Well, you know, but you're the player. You're the important one.
Confession time, though. I can't do first-person shooters because despite the fact that I am the perfect age to be able to do first-person shooters, I just never got into it.
Oh, really?
And like, yeah, once you have to start aiming up and down, I can't do it anymore.
You know what? I was the same way for the longest time because, again, I'm old enough to remember when like Wolfenstein and Doom were, you know, those were first person shooters, and you didn't have to aim up or down in those games. If something was above or below you, it didn't matter. If you were facing in the right direction, that's what you were shooting. So it took me a long time to get used to that, especially in the early days of first person shooters on like the PlayStation and the Saturn, where you didn't have the dual analog sticks. Dual analog sticks made things a lot easier after the fact, especially post Halo. But Yeah, I get it. I totally get it. I was not. I've been into first person shooters, and some of them are really great, but I don't play a ton of them anymore. I do not have the skill to play a multiplayer either.
Yeah, multiplayer is just never going to happen for me ever for any of those. Even if I can get good enough to go through a single player campaign, which, on easy all day long, then, multiplayer is never going to happen. And my wife can't handle the first person views anyway. So we like to sit there and play with each other stuff. So her not being able to watch very much of it would be a problem.
Did going to third person help? You can go to third person in this game, right?
I keep forgetting about that on this one.
It doesn't really change much. I mean, it just zooms the camera out a tiny bit, but I think it can help with people. If it's motion sickness you're worried about, it can help a little bit with that. But yeah.
Yeah, she's weird. Like some of the newer Zelda games even get to her eventually.
Okay.
We just need to go back to perfectly 2D everything.
Yeah, I mean that's like a trend lately, which I'm super excited about. It's funny because again, playing this week, I was thinking about how could this translate? Would this have translated into a 2D game? Because one of the things that we did struggle with a lot, and as I'm playing this, I was realizing it as well. I mean, the cool thing about the Cyclone armor is, of course, it turns into a motorcycle, and we had a lot of plans to take advantage of that in Invasion that we didn't get to actually do. As an example, in the very first level, like our levels are sprawling and they're multi-point, multi-objective levels, which I kind of love. Even replaying it recently, like I love that we did that. But like the town you start in is in this big circular canyon, and it's cordoned off at two ends, and then there's just like these the Skulls is the gang name that's attacking the town. And the reason it's in a big circular canyon is because in the original design document, there was supposed to be a race, which I think is directly out of the show. I think one of the episodes, this sort of thing happens. So you actually were supposed to race, I think, the leader of the Skulls, I think, for Guppy's toolkit. And we just couldn't, I think we just didn't have the time to do that. But of course, the architecture had already been created. Like the way that the game was made is the levels had already been created, and then we would go in and build the encounters. And so the vestiges of what was planned are all there, but it's just, that particular mission just never ended up getting created, or we couldn't create it because we couldn't get the physics working right or something like that. So even as I was playing it this week, I just remember running through that canyon thinking like, God, this would have been so cool. It would have been so neat to have this race through this canyon, but it just didn't work. So yeah, we struggled a lot to take advantage of the Cyclone cycle because of the physics. We had issues. We couldn't make it go too fast because we were streaming the levels, and the PlayStation 2 in particular, the performance on that really hampered what we wanted to do. So yeah, we struggled for ways to do that. And I was just thinking how in a 2D game it would have been so much easier to, this is a racing stage. Now you're in the bike mode, or you just have these long stretches where you could ride and shoot things. It would have worked. But I think we did manage to get a few different areas in there where you had to use the bike, usually to escape explosions. And I know in the swamp level there was a race across a broken highway, which was actually one of my levels. So I was really proud of that too, that I found a way to use that bike in that level. But looking back on it, I wish we could have found more ways to use the cycle.
Or what else popped into my mind is if they try to make the game like 4 or 5 years later, all of a sudden you're on the PS3 and the 360 DLC.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. And even being on the 360 or the PS3 would have helped with so many of the problems that we had. Like I said, because in the game, and this was thrown in sort of late stage, anytime you go into a tunnel, you're forced into the armor mode and you have to walk. And then we sort of explained it away in dialogue to say like, oh, it's the safety system on the Cyclone. But the real reason that happened was because, again, the physics system, the PlayStation in particular, couldn't keep up with it. So if you rammed a wall at just the right second, you could go through it while you were in bike mode. So we just had to sort of take you out of bike mode because those tunnels had to exist because we were streaming the levels, right? So even the increased power of those two systems, or just being able to stream the levels in a little bit faster would have fixed all those problems. But we were making a PlayStation 2 and Xbox game, and that's what we had to work with. So we found where we could to use the Cyclone cycle.
And that working within the constraints of the system that you're forced into, I think, is what makes most of these games just the special things that they are, because you don't get to go back and fix anything for anything that I've looked at on the show, at least. Like, you put out the game, that's the game, the end.
Yep.
Like, you might randomly get, an extra like release of Majora's Mask kind of thing where they fix something, or when it gets localized for over here, they fix something that was a bug in the Japanese version. But I mean, once it's out, you can't really update your copy.
Right. Yeah, and that's exactly it. And especially when you're talking about games sort of at the level that we were at, because we were not a AAA game, right? I mean, we were working in a pretty strict budget as well. So, even the chance to do a V.1 or something like that, like a different revision, was almost next to nothing. There was almost no chance of that. And actually, saying that, I know for sure there is still a bug that exists in the PlayStation 2 version where a level section at the very end of the game will unload, and if you turn around, it just never comes back. You can completely break the game and fall through the world there. We discovered it after we'd shipped the game, and it was just, well, that's a thing now. I don't know if anyone ever found it. We never got mail saying that they did, but it was definitely there.
So if you found it, definitely tell us, because that would be
Yeah.
really cool.
Or now go find it now that you know it's there. I don't remember exactly which level it is, but I think it might even be the final level, and it's only on PlayStation 2.
They're just going to have to go play the entire game now.
There you go. They should anyway.
I
It's a
know,
great story.
right? It really is. And that's one of the things that really, I mean, all of these, I hate to lump all the giant robot games together, but because they're more than just giant robots, but they all have that same like side story parallel thing going where, yes, you're playing it, you get the story of what's going on in the general world, you know exactly what the stakes are, you know who people are, you know who you're supposed to be, but you get to go in and it's still something brand new that you're going into. When I'm playing like a Spider-Man game, then Spider-Man's going to win at the end.
Right.
Everything in there is going to happen. If it's a storyline that they've done, then okay, you know exactly what happens there. But this, even if you're doing a storyline that's been done, you're not being one of the main characters from the franchise. So
Yeah.
maybe the good guys win, but you as a player get something that would generally be a loss because you're not necessarily the main character.
Yeah, and we definitely tried to accomplish that because we kind of hit players with a surprise second player, sort of second parallel quest halfway through the game, where you take over, I think her name is Tasha, and play as her for the second half of the game, which I don't think we really... You see her at one point, I think a little earlier, but I don't think we really telegraphed that it was coming. So that was kind of cool, I think. And then, of course, we had 3 different endings. And don't ask me what the 3 different endings were. I do not remember anymore. But there are 3 different endings in that game. So,
Well, they were that thing and that other thing and the third thing. Come on, guys.
Right.
You know I'm not going to spoil it like that. But
Yeah.
as we start to wrap things up here, what do you think are the things that this one really gets right about Robotech?
You know what I think the main thing it gets right? I loved that we could, as far as the combat goes, I wish we had stuck to our guns and made fighting... The whole idea was that the Invid were supposed to be very formidable, and you would try to pick them apart by blowing off limbs and things like that, which we kept in the game. But we ended up making them sort of bullet sponges. So I think we got it right in a way, but I wish we'd stuck to our guns. But I think the big thing that we got right, that I'm still super proud of, even playing it now, it's kind of really reminded me of it, is I think our levels really conveyed the ruined world that the show took place in, with all the wrecked ships everywhere. Like there's one level, I think it's the second big level in the game. Well, first of all, even in the first level, you've got that hive that's just sort of looming over the entire level, and you do eventually get to it. But like it's always there in the distance, you can always see it, and you're constantly referencing it. So it's just this foreboding thing that's there right from the start. And there's one of those in the second level too, but in the second level, um it's more like a ship graveyard. Like when you start, sort of the gateway into the level is this downed capital ship that's in two pieces, and then there's a giant capital, a crashed capital ship, that's sort of the centerpiece of the whole level, and the whole level just kind of wanders around the edges of it and goes through the middle of it, and you know what I mean. And it just, as I'm playing it, realizing I feel like our levels flowed really well. I feel like it really captured the sort of, I would almost call it like a Mad Max vibe, where it's just like it's just a ruined world, you know. Like in the third level in the swamp, you've got this broken highway, this freeway that's just in pieces, and it just really conveys how this used to be like a thriving um, planet filled with life, and now it's just been destroyed and it's been ravaged by these, well, now three wars. You know, could it have looked better if we had a huge budget or if we were on a one of the later consoles? Absolutely. But even playing it now, I think we did a really good job with that. I'm super proud of that part of the game.
The world building in there, I think, is the best part for me, because like you said, you've got these wars that obviously happened. You have these people that are obviously tired of what's going on physically, mentally, emotionally, like every single way possible, but they know that, it's either deal with it and get rid of the invids, or just you might as well just lay down and die, because that's what's going to happen to you anyway.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. I again, it's, when I play it with a very critical eye. And I wish I'd kept copies of the design documents and all that stuff, but I didn't, unfortunately. But I'll go into an alcove and remember, oh, here's what was really supposed to happen here, and we couldn't do it. But at the end of the day, I think we did a good job with what we had at our disposal. Like you said, I think we did a good job with the world building, and it's not a Halo killer or anything, but it was never going to be. I think it's a solid game. I think it's worth playing, especially if, speaking as a fan, living a different story inside the world that you love so much. I think we pulled it off.
What do you think this one really gets wrong looking at Robotech?
I would have, again, I think we didn't take advantage of the cycle nearly as much as we should have. And I think we didn't balance the Invid properly. In the show, taking on a trooper is kind of, in a Cyclone cycle, it's kind of, it's a fraught situation, right? Like you're definitely outmatched, you're outnumbered even when it's one-on-one, because you're so much smaller, you don't have the same level of firepower. And that was the plan in the design, but we found that doing that, having one enemy on screen at a time, wasn't exciting. So we had to pump it up, and to pump it up, the way we ended up doing it was just turning them into bullet sponges. I wish we could have gone back and done something differently there, but for the most part, I think that's my main complaint. It made the levels feel a little bit empty sometimes, a little bit long between encounters, but yeah, I think it would be interesting to go back on a more powerful system and try to do that again, to see if we could have made the Invid battles more compelling. Yeah, I'd say that's probably it. Although I will say, and I meant to call this out, I know we're getting ready to wrap up here, but talking about things that went right, the opening level in the game, I'm very, very proud of, because that was my level. And it was actually our E3 demo. It actually didn't exist in the original game design doc. The opening level actually takes place on the title screen. When Take-Two came to us and said they actually wanted to show the game at the E3 preceding the release of the game, we didn't have a demo. And our levels weren't good as an E3 demo because the levels are gigantic, right? So I wasn't picked because I was the best choice or anything. I'd like to say I was, but I happened to be, I think I had the lowest workload at the time. So they basically put a nav mesh underneath this 3D title screen we had, and just said, create an action packed level that is a run at the hive. It's reflex point. It's your ultimate goal. It's where you end up landing. You crash land there and you fight your way through. And so I put that level together. And going back to what you said about limitations actually being important, I agree, because they lead to a lot of creativity. And in the process of building that level and scripting out a bunch of different elements, we created a few new elements like this skybox that had all the explosions in it. That was a thing that didn't exist before we did the E3 level. A lot of scripted plane crashes and things didn't exist. I took the limited resources. I think it looks like there's a bunch of planes flying overhead and attacking the hive during that level. It's actually, I think, only 2 planes that are running different paths and then respawning elsewhere. But anyway, I was really, really proud of the way that level turned out. And I felt like what we were aiming for was the Normandy invasion in one of the most recent, I think it was Call of Duty, was the one that had the attack and the landing at Normandy, trying to sort of recapture that level of excitement. And I've actually gone back and played that again recently, and then played this level again and realized I think I actually managed to do it. So super proud of that. And again, that was the E3 demo, then ended up being on like the official Xbox magazine demo disc, and then it ended up being appended to the game as our opening level, which originally was not supposed to be. So I feel like that was another thing that we got right. But it had a negative knock-on effect where if you play the game and you know that level wasn't supposed to be there, we very slowly introduced the different types of Invid throughout the first level. And it kind of took away from the impact of those introductions because you'd already fought all of them in the opening level, like en masse. So yeah, it had a negative knock on a little bit, but I think it was a really strong opening for the game. It was much stronger than what we had originally. So sorry, I know I went in reverse order there, but I wanted to call that out because it is something that even when I play it today, I'm really proud of how that turned out.
I mean, to be fair, I was gonna poke at you till you told the story anyway.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So yeah, no, it was, the ironic thing was that I got to go to E3 for Vicious Cycle that year, and that demo was behind closed doors, and I was not allowed in to see it. Even when I stood there.
Did they know that you made it?
Yeah, I wasn't allowed in.
Did they at least think it was funny?
I think the people at the door probably thought it was funny. They also knew that they weren't allowed to let me in, so they probably didn't care all that much. But
I mean, as long as
really
they think
ironic.
it's funny while they keep you out, that's fine.
Yeah. It's like the one and only time I've ever produced anything that was shown at E3 and I wasn't allowed to go see it. So, oh well.
I mean, outside of any of those things, the only things I can think of that this gets wrong are, because it's a side story, it's things that are never going to happen. And that's just being super, super nitpicky. So it doesn't count.
One thing too that strikes me that was always such a bummer is that we have the character Lancer, but we couldn't get Cam Clark to come back and voice him. And it was, what sucked about that is because I kind of expected we would, because Cam Clark, who was the actor who played Lancer back in the 80s, also played Max Sterling. He played Jack Archer in the first Robotech game in Battlecry. So I kind of just assumed he was going to come back, but we couldn't get him back. So anytime Lancer speaks, again, if you're not a Robotech nerd, you're not going to know that anyway. But it's not Cam Clark, which always bummed me out a little bit. When I heard it playing today, when I met up with Scott and Lancer and listened to the conversation, the guy playing Scott is the original actor, but Cam Clark is not there to play Lancer. So that's nitpicky, but as a fan, I was kind of bummed out that we couldn't do it.
If you knew somebody who wasn't into Robotech, they wanted to be, would you give them this game as part of a primer course?
I think yes, in the right context. I think this game works better as an existing fan than it does as a standalone or as a first exposure to the series. I think it still shows you what you're going to get out of the third season or the third war. And it gives you a little bit of the context, but I think it's way more effective as a companion piece to the show, having seen the show first, or even watching the show along the same time, because it is making references to the actual plot of the show. So I think that's an important primer. I think, yeah, I think it would go in that direction.
Yeah, I think giving somebody this would be like starting on The Empire Strikes Back, and it can be good. You can still enjoy it, but it's just so much better if you already know what's happened before that.
Right. Yeah. Again, I think like any of those games that we're talking about, I'm sure the Gundam games are the same way. It's probably far more effective if you've been exposed to the series before you pick those games up.
Except for Endless Wing, because it's just a fighter. And,
Oh, well.
you know, fighters, who cares? They're just fun.
Right.
And finally, if you were going to get to remake this game, but it gets to be Muppets as your main characters, who are you playing as in this one?
Oh my gosh. Muppets, eh? I'm trying to think of a Muppet that doesn't say much. Animal.
That's the big problem, because, like, do you go with one of the main Muppets, but they will not keep quiet?
Right.
You know?
But I mean, everything he says is gibberish. That or Beaker, I guess. But yeah.
I mean, they both work.
Yeah.
It's about what I was thinking too. Like that or one of the Meep aliens.
Yeah. I mean, you could also just put all of the cast as part of the cast from Pigs in Space. That would work too.
Ooh.
It's kind of, maybe the rest of the crew, like Silas
Yeah.
and Guppy and Arturo.
Pigs in Space with Animal. That would be so much fun. Well, Greg, it has been great talking to you about all of this. If people want to hear more from you, where else can they find you around the internet?
You can find me on our weekly show, the Player One Podcast, which is hosted by myself and a couple of other ex-Ziff Davis game journalists, Chris Johnston and Phil Theobald. We're actually 10 weeks away from our 1000th episode. So we've been going for just about 20 years. And if you like old video games, which if you're listening to this show, I'm assuming you do like old video games, go find me on YouTube. Just look up my name, Greg Sewart. I have a web series on there called Generation 16 that's chronologically playing through and reviewing all of the Mega Drive / Genesis games. And those have turned into a little bit more than just reviews. They've turned into kind of mini docs on all the different games. So go check that out and see if you dig it. I think it's pretty good.
I also think it's pretty good from what I've seen, and I don't have the bias of having made it. So that's somebody agreeing with you.
I appreciate that.
And just like always, we'll have links to all that stuff down in the show notes, because clicking links is so much easier than trying to remember how to spell things. Especially when I have to keep reminding myself that it's Sewart and not Stewart, which is a reminder to all the listeners too. As always, if you want to hear more from me, the best place to do that is over on playcomics.com. There's links to all the social media things. I've pretty much settled in on using Blue Sky and Threads, although this week has been rather dry because I just got off of jury duty. Yeah, they don't let you use your phone. It's like they don't want you to look up the news while you're trying to do a case or something. It's really weird. I can't imagine why that would be. If you want to be on the show, then there's a link to what I'm looking to get booked the soonest down in the show notes. You should definitely check that out. You know, if you see something on there that catches your eye, let me know. Show it to your friends. Show it to random people that say that they're interested in this kind of thing. That's fine. Like, I want to get good guests, and the best way to get good guests is to get people that are excited about specific games or comic franchises or both. If you want to help support the show, then you can be like Dan McMahon and Ono Lit Class and give the show money, because unfortunately it does cost money to run a podcast. But really the biggest thing is to just share it with other people. Share it with your friends, your enemies, your family, the people that you work with. Burn it on a CD and then run it into the future somehow, because you're running really, really fast. And then they'll tell you, I've already heard that episode. It's 3 years old because you ran really fast and the episode is from the past because you ran into the future. I think that's how time travel works. I'm not entirely sure. Don't forget that Play Comics is a part of the GonnaGeek.com network, home to such other wonderful shows as Capes on the Couch, where Anthony is torturing me on the social media and highlighting different characters that are not Ghost Spider. So I'm not saying to go call him out for that kind of crap, but definitely listen to the episodes because they're good, even if they're not about Ghost Spider. Anthony, you're a monster. If you want to hear Carrington and I talk about all these pieces of media that we experienced as children and those life lessons we learned that we were just supposed to forget when we got older, then check out Sugar Spite and Everything is Fine. There's a link to that down in the show notes as well. We need to get on recording some more episodes. We've gotten through our test batch of things, and I think that's going to be really good. I've only heard good things from people that have listened to it and bothered to talk to me about it. So I'm excited for the way that it is seemingly being perceived by everybody. If you like the music that I'm really talking over right now, head on over to backingtrack.gg and check out all the great music over there. But most of all, just grab a game, grab a stack of comics, and go find yourself a new favorite character.